So, in order to show some of the common pitfalls that students can make when attempting to recreate an American English accent, I've decided to show some clips from a recent lesson that I had with one of my regular advanced students in English. This student has been taking lessons with me for some time now, and she speaks English very well, but one of her goals is that she would like to have a very good American English accent. So, some of the things I like to focus on, particularly when I'm working with a student of advanced level, are I need to make sure that the vowels, especially, are working well. One of the biggest problems that I think students have when they start learning English is having accurate vowel quality, whether that means the placement of a tongue, placement of the lips, and also vowel length as well is something that I think is important when trying to replicate an English accent in any dialect. We're also going to be listening to some of the more advanced consonant combinations and consonant sounds that exist in English. Some of the common ones that people tend to pronounce incorrectly, such as th and the, and we'll see that come up in the videos as we move ahead. So at this point in the lessons, we have already gone over how all the sounds are pronounced. We've already gone over all the rules of English phonetics. And right now, we're really just going and doing reading exercises to kind of make sure that the accent is coming out well in practice. This student, Dora, is an actress, so one of the ways that she likes to go over accent reduction in particular is by reading movie scripts and plays. So in this lesson, you'll hear that we are going over a movie script. And what I like to do during that time is I like to stop when something I feel is a little bit imperfect and to go over the kinds of ways in which I feel that it could be improved.
Look, don't try to pass yourself off as some kind of an intellect at the expense of my friend just to impress these girls.
A couple things, okay?
Mhm.
Make sure in the ending of syllables that the R sounds don't go away. So when we have the word yourself, yourself, make sure I really hear the
Mhm.
yourself.
Mhm. Okay.
Um,
So in this clip, we're able to see a few things already occurring that are pretty common for students when they're starting off with their accent reduction training. The R in coda positions is something that comes up often with my students. When you have a word like car or far or here or near or your, then in times like those, it's very easy for students that are speaking English as a second language for them to become a bit lazy with the pronunciation and drop the R. That is something that is valid if you're trying to learn an accent that is from somewhere outside of the United States. There are very many accents in the world where they do drop R's in final positions. But here in the United States, you're going to hear most people pronouncing R's in the final positions. And those people in the United States that don't pronounce R's in final positions, those are very specific regional accents. And they're oftentimes kind of like looked upon in the United States as being kind of silly sounding or kind of fun sounding. So to have a standard American accent, it's necessary in English when you're speaking a standard general American accent to pronounce the R's in coda positions. And the way that we do that physically is by making sure that our tongue is raised in our mouth. For example, if I say a word like your, I can feel the tip of my tongue is raised in my mouth and creating that space for this kind of ra sound to come out.
your vowel in the word look, it can be slightly more relaxed. When we have these vowels in English, they're really less pure than they are in other languages. So it's not going to be like look, but it's going to be like
Yeah.
look. So there is like a roundness to it, but it's not like quite as much of a roundness as like an oo vowel.
Another common thing we can hear happening in this video is that the open vowels are not quite open enough. In American English, we have open vowels and we have closed vowels, just like many other languages do. And the difference between an oo and an o is very important because there is a difference between the pronunciation of those two sounds, and we conceptualize those vowels as different vowels in English. And this vowel here is pronounced pretty well, but the reason why I stopped here is because I thought that the O sound could be a little bit more open. What I mean by that is to have less roundness of the lips, right? When I say a name like Luke, my lips are quite forward and quite rounded. But when I say a word like look, you can see when the shift from oo to o that my lips actually go back and become less rounded. It should also be noted that even though this O sound exists in other languages, for example, German, this student comes from a native German kind of level of speaking. that even though they do have an O sound, that the O sound in German is actually a little bit more closed than it is in English, and that we actually need to relax our lips even more. The O sound in German, it's not really the same as when I say a word like look, look. Those two sounds are very close, but in the American English version, you're going to hear that the vowel is a lot more relaxed and it comes out as O, 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 and less like O, O, O. Okay? So that's why I want to hear a real vowel like look and not like look, look.
Look, don't try to pass yourself off as some kind of an intellect at the expense of my friend just to impress these girls.
Good. Now, the only other one small thing I would say is in the word don't. Make sure that the vowel is really an O vowel. So not don't, but don't. Don't.
Okay, don't.
Yes, exactly. Good.
Okay.
Lastly, pronouncing a vowel in English like O, it needs to be noted that this is really a diphthong in English. We don't have in American English a pure O vowel, but it's always going to become a diphthong at the end, shifting towards an O sound. So if I say a word in English like no or don't, you can really hear I'm not saying no and don't, but I'm saying no and don't. So in American English, I really need to be sure that I'm shifting my lips through that O sound. Otherwise, if you say a word like don't, then it sounds a little bit off and it sounds like the word is understandable, but it doesn't create a very natural sounding American English accent.
Clark is lost now, searching for a graceful any exit.
You didn't connect the K of Clark onto is. You said Clark is lost now, which is totally fine.
Uh-huh.
But I think that we would probably connect them because is not such an important word in the context of a sentence. So it's probably not going to receive a kind of break in the sentence.
Yeah.
So we're going to say Clark is lost. Clark is lost.
Mhm. Clark is lost now, searching for a graceful any exit.
One thing that I think people need to do when they start getting to an intermediate or advanced level of speaking English and when they want to have a very good American English accent is to think about how we link words together. For example, most of the time in English, when I have a word that begins with a vowel and the word that preceded that word ends in a consonant, then normally we're going to link the consonant that came before onto the beginning of the next word in a way where we might not if there's some kind of other combination happening. For example, if I say a word in English like hat, hat, you can hear at the end of that word that there really is an unreleased T sound. Not a lot of people are going to say hat, hat, but if I say something like the hat is in the closet, then when I do that, I link the T over. It's not a very strong aspirated T, it's that flap T sound that I talked about in previous videos, but it's not unreleased like it is in other contexts, like when it comes at the end of an utterance or a pause or the next word begins with a consonant. So here, when I have the two words Clark and is, I'm going to connect that K sound since the next word begins with a vowel, and I'm going to say Clark is, Clark is. Not Clark is, but Clark is. Native speakers will connect words that end in consonants and words that begin with vowels. It's something that happens naturally for us without even really thinking about it. And in order to sound more native, it's good to try to get that concept into your head because this happens very, very often in English.
The sad thing is, in about 50 years, you might start doing some thinking on your own, and by then you'll realize there are only two certainties in life.
Very good. Just make sure the sound in the word the, it almost came out like a little bit like a the, instead of the. It was very close. Just make sure the tongue is a little bit more far forward in the mouth because it almost came out like a the instead of the.
At the beginning,
Mhm.
mhm, the sad thing is,
That's good.
okay,
Let's continue.
Clark. Yeah, what are those?
Make sure in those again that it's really a the sound.
What are those?
Hmm.
These th and the sounds are sounds that my students oftentimes have trouble with, and it's one of their least favorite sounds, okay? In order to make a th or a the sound correctly in English, I really need to make sure that the tip of my tongue is protruding from in between my teeth just a slight bit. So when I say th or the, you can see how my tongue comes out and I go th or the. And the difference between a th sound and a the sound is based on voicing. So what that means is when I say th, my vocal cords are not vibrating in order to make a voiced sound. And when I say the, my vocal cords are vibrating to make a voiced sound. And a common error that my students make when trying to replicate this sound is they replace the th with a t, and they replace the with a d. So it's very easy to kind of replace those two sounds with the incorrect sounds since they are kind of somewhat close to one another. But we do hear an extremely large difference in English between th and t and the and da. Those sounds are like night and day to us.
He turns and walks away.
Yes. A little bit of thought in those was. So make sure he
Okay.
turns and walks away.
He turns and walks away.
The first one sounded good. The second one still had a slight bit of thought in it to me.
He turns and walks away.
That's better, yes.
Okay. I think I have to make some extra effort on these V's so that to articulate them more, because if I don't do this, it's kind of lazy in a wrong way, and then it's nearer. It's more like a V.
Mm-hmm. I don't speak Hungarian, obviously, but I'm assuming there's no w sound in Hungarian.
No, there's no.
Right. It's a pretty uncommon sound in most languages. Most languages don't have a w, but they tend to have a v. So
Yeah.
at least in German, there's no w, but there's a v. And I'm assuming in Hungarian, it's the same thing where there's no w, but there's a v. So the challenge is to make a w sound, and it's to make sure that you don't allow your lips to touch together at all, or you don't also allow your bottom lip to touch your top teeth as well. Because there are a lot of ways you can kind of make a w sound that's a little bit imperfect. I can say like w, w, w. And that, it's like my lips are touching a slight bit, but even that small touch, it's enough to create a sound that even though we might understand what you're saying, it sounds a bit foreign to an American person. Another way is if I say like va, 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 like that's top teeth, bottom lip. It's still like a little bit of va sound in there. It's not very strong, but it's enough to create a sound that sounds like foreign when an American person hears you speak. So the w sound is all about tightness of the lips. It's really in a like forward and very rounded position when I say w, w, w. And I can actually do that like and as long as this center part of my lips doesn't come together, then I'm not making a v sound. So it's just about avoiding the temptation to put your lips together to make this like v sound.
He turns and walks away.
Yeah, good.
I will.
Say it one more time.
I will.
Make sure the W is really a W. I'm will.
I will.
One more time.
I will.
Still sounds like it has a slight bit of like v in it. So I'm will. Try to separate it. I'm will.
I'm will. Oh, I also hear there's something.
I think that your lips are slightly too tight together this way. I
Okay.
think they need to be more like this way. Okay. I'm will.
I'm will.
Yes, that sounded better. So now try to put it together at a normal kind of speed.
I'm will.
Still hear a little bit of v
In where?
in will. Yeah.
In after the w?
It's like when you say I'm will, it sounds like w instead of w.
Okay. I'm I'm will.
Yes, that sounds better. So
I
what did you do there?
I have to think of an u.
Yes, exactly. So remember that we have the three consonants in English that they have pre-vowels. The pre-vowel for what is oo. I say will.
Okay.
The pre-vowel for ya is e. If I say yes, then I'm starting with an e. And the pre-vowel for a r sound is an If I say red, then I have red.
Okay. It wasn't clear for me until now.
Yeah.
I think I'm looking for something between an oo and a w.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm I'm Will.
Yeah, that sounds better. That sounds much
Okay.
better.
The W sound is another common sound that people sometimes have trouble making. And the way that they kind of make that error is they replace a W sound with kind of a V sound or a B sound. When I make a W sound in English, I really have my lips tight forward and rounded to the front. So I say W, W. You can hear that the W sound is almost kind of preceded by an oo sound. So when I say a word like where, there really is a kind of oo coming out first when I say where. The key to pronouncing this sound correctly is making sure that your lips don't come together and touch, because as soon as your lips come together and touch and you say where, or where, then that sound is something that sounds a bit off. It sounds a bit foreign to people that speak English with an American accent. And it's going to kind of mark you as being potentially not a native speaker, which is not the end of the world. But if you want to speak with a very good American English accent, then it's best to pronounce that consonant as it's supposed to be pronounced, like a W sound. So I hope this video was able to help you all with some common mistakes you might be making with the American English accent. And I hope it showed you how I go about working with students to help them improve their accent.